네, 그럼 전북과 세계를 연결하는 글로벌 대체 투자, 인프라 세컨더리 바이아웃이라는 주제로 전북 국제금융 컨퍼런스의 첫 번째 세션을 시작하도록 하겠습니다. So the first session of GFIC 2018 will begin immediately. So I'd like to tell you that we are still providing simultaneous interpretation today. So if you do not understand Korean, please use the earphone or the receiver you have on your table. 또 한국어, 영어 지금 저희가 동시 통역이 계속 제공이 되니까요. 통역 서비스 이용해 주시면 되고요. 여기 앞에 계신 한국 분들도 영어로 하셔도 되고 한국어로 하셔도 됩니다. 그럼 첫 번째 강연 소개해드리겠습니다. 첫 번째 강연은 영국 국제통상부 수석 IR 매니저이신 휴드 리지냥 매니저님께서 영국 인프라 투자 현황 및 전망에 대해서 발표를 해주실 건데요. 잠시 소개해드리면 휴드 리지냥 매니저님은 영국 국제통상부에 오시기 전에 공공, 민간 자본시장 분야에서 30년이 넘는 경험을 쌓으셨고 또 넷웨스트 마켓, 영국 법인 영업 지점장 및 소시에테 제너럴 이 범유럽 주식 영업 총괄을 역임하셨습니다. 그럼 이제 앞으로 모시겠습니다. So, Mr. Hughes de Virginal, it's your turn. So could you please go up to the podium? So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him with a big round of applause. 여러분 박수로 환영해 주십시오.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to address you all. And I'd like to, in particular, thank the Governor and the Chairman of MPS for asking us to talk. My name is Hugh de Lusignan, and with my colleagues that work here in the Embassy in Seoul, we work for the Department for International Trade. At the department, we're interested in encouraging sustainable, long-term economic prosperity through increased trade and international investment. The Korean investment community is of huge importance to the UK economy, and I recognize that many of you from the investment community have already invested in the UK, including MPS. And for example, this year, the Korean investment community represent about a quarter of all investment in property in the City of London. As an investment destination, the UK has strong economic fundamentals. We continue to attract more FDI than anywhere else in Europe, and the third most on Earth. International investors, such as you here today, want to invest in the UK because we have an open, liberal economy, world-class talent, a flexible labour market, and a business-friendly environment, all of which drive a strong economy. Our competitive taxation, stable regulatory environment, and incentives for investment in research and development inspire confidence. And we're in the top 10 countries in the world in terms of the indexes for the ease of doing business. Our universities are a magnet for the world's talent and a pipeline for highly skilled workers and entrepreneurs. But we can't rest on the strength of our economy, and we have to invest in the future in much the same way as meeting the challenges that we heard about Korea. Almost a year ago, our government in the UK launched our industrial strategy, and we set out 4 grand challenges. These 4 challenges represent major global trends that are significant for the UK economy and for every single economy on Earth, and I'm sure including Korea. And those challenges are artificial intelligence, all the advantages that brings, but also some of the threats that it brings. An aging society. How do we keep society together? How do we incorporate the different age groups? Clean, carbon-neutral growth is the third, and the fourth and final grand challenge is the future of mobility. Any country's success in meeting these challenges will put that country at the forefront of the industries of the future. In order to meet these challenges, we put it together an industrial strategy. And underpinning the industrial strategy are 5 foundations. And these, again, 5 foundations, I'm sure you'll agree, are universal. Ideas, creating the world's most innovative economy. People, you and me, the provision of good jobs and a greater earning power for all. The business environment, being determined to make the UK the best place in the world to make international investments and to start and grow a business. Places, creating prosperous communities across the UK, towns and cities where people can live, go to university, and get decent, good jobs. And the subject of this speech, and at the heart of this, is infrastructure, and a major upgrade to the UK infrastructure. This slide just illustrates the track record of what already has been achieved. And a lot of this achievement in the way the UK has fronted into infrastructure has been a partnership between government, between public investment and private investment, working together to deliver for the community. This is underpinned by a strong, independent regulatory regime. Our National Infrastructure Delivery Plan and Pipeline aims to invest over £600 billion in UK infrastructure. And that's split between, as I said beforehand, government and private sector funding. This is the fastest growing infrastructure investment in the G7, and within it, we boast Europe's largest infrastructure projects. So what are we investing in? Social infrastructure, and that's particularly housing, trying to build 650,000 new homes through a £5.5 billion investment from the Housing Infrastructure Fund. A £1 billion investment from the government through to the digital infrastructure, moving through 5G test beds and high-speed broadband, and rolling that out beyond our cities. Investment also has to go into transport, into airports, into road and rail. And lastly, on energy, moving into a carbon neutral future. This slide just goes over the policies of the National Infrastructure Commission. And you can see there some of the details that we are looking to move towards in terms of future movements towards sustainability. I think, interestingly, amongst those sorts of numbers are, for instance, that only EV cars, electric vehicles, will be sold from 2030. That's rapidly approaching and is going to need huge structural investment in electricity supply, electricity demand infrastructure, and a complete rebuilding of an industrial base where people have been building cars under the old model of petrol and diesel. This slide quickly shows the areas of investment over the next 10 years, and as I say beforehand, this is a very large and major program that's coming through. In terms of energy infrastructure, there are 3 main trends that drive the reshaping of the energy landscape, both again in the UK and in the rest of the world. And those are the 3 Ds: decarbonisation, decentralisation, and digitalisation. In terms of decarbonisation, under the 2008 Climate Change Act, the UK has committed to cut greenhouse emissions by at least 40% by 2030 and 80% by 2050. Our industrial strategy, as I said before, prioritizes decarbonisation of electricity generation, of heat and transportation. Decentralisation is important in this. And we heard about decentralisation within the financial sector earlier. But fragmentation of generation assets into smaller distributed units means investment opportunities to new investors and also a huge demand for new infrastructure. Investment is also going to be required into the technology that integrates distributed energy assets, including batteries, into the electricity system or grid. And finally, on digitalization, digital technologies offer huge new areas for growth. When integrated into the energy system, smart technologies, data and analysis software can significantly increase in efficiency and integration improvement, bringing down costs and improving performance. This slide just quickly illustrates the funding model that we're looking at moving forward. And as you can see, in certain areas such as utilities and energy, a lot of this investment will come from the private sector and has been very successful in doing so. In other areas, the government has to step in because it's natural in things like transport that road infrastructure will largely come from the state. Energy investment in the UK has been very successful. Offshore wind now from the UK provides 30% of our energy needs. It also represents 40% of the world's output of offshore wind energy. And that's at the moment at a 5.8 gigawatts. There's already another 6 million gigawatts under construction in the North Sea. And next year, when we have the CFD auction, there will be another 6 megawatts in the pipeline coming through from that. Another example of investment in infrastructure I've just put up here is a high-speed rail from London to Birmingham, which is all about regenerating the centre of a city. The time that it will take to get from London to Birmingham will drop from around an hour and 20 minutes to something like 40 minutes. That means huge potential expansion in the linkages between London and Birmingham. And the centre of Birmingham, if I invite any of you to come and see it, has been completely rebuilt. And we've got major financial businesses moving to the centre of Birmingham, such as HSBC. The picture on the right here is the picture of the new railway station that's being built to accommodate the high-speed train. My slide here is an advert. We have a website for the Department of Trade, and we showcase a lot of the opportunities that are around in the UK. These are all infrastructure opportunities. They're all opportunities that fit into the industrial strategy that I talked about earlier. And if you have any time and you just want to see how the UK approaches it, it might be worth looking at the website, and you'll be able to look through all of the package of information we have there. So in conclusion, I'd like to thank you very much for listening to me. I'd like to wish you the very best for your new venture here, and I'm sure MPS will be a success in its new location. We really appreciate the investment that we've had from MPS over the last years. It's been really significant, and we strongly believe that nations that invest in each other and trade with each other will grow the prosperity of all their people together. Thank you very much.
Okay, that was Mr. Hugues de Loginon, the Senior Investor Relations Manager of the Capital Investment Directorate at the Department of International Trade, UK. Thank you so much for your great presentation. 그럼 두 번째 강의를 소개해 드리겠습니다. 이번에는요. 스톤피크 파트너스의 공동 CEO이신 트렌트 비치 대표님께서 북미 인프라 투자에 대해서 발표해 주시겠습니다. 트렌트 비치 대표님은 뉴욕에 본사를 두고 있는 158억 달러의 자산을 운용하고 있는 사모 투자 기업인 스톤피크 파트너스의 공동 설립자이시고요. 또 회장이시며 CEO이십니다. 그럼 대표님 앞으로 모시겠습니다. So now Mr. Trent Veitch, the co-founder and co-chairman and co-CEO of Stonepeak Partners will give us another presentation. So now let me invite him up to the podium. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him with a big round of applause. 여러분 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
Thank you so much for the very warm welcome, and thank you very much for having me down here in the wonderful city of Jeonju. Just by way of background, I'm originally from Australia, so from the Asian region. I've spent the last 20 years in the US investing in North American infrastructure. And one of the things I would say is that through that experience, it seems very similar to what you're trying to do here. When I first arrived in the US, infrastructure wasn't a defined asset class. And so myself and some of my colleagues that I first started to work with spent a lot of time trying to develop that market. And it's hard work, and you have to explain a lot to people to get these things going. But with grit and determination, you can really reap the rewards. And we see a very bright future for the city of Jeonju and some of the early steps it's made to make itself a financial hub in Korea. So just by way of background, Stonepeak is one of the largest infrastructure managers globally, and we focus on the North American market. So we have one of the largest teams that's investing in the US. We have offices in New York, Houston, and Austin. I founded the business with a partner of mine. We've been working together for almost 20 years, and we started Stonepeak in 2011. Together with our team and operating partners, we have about 71 people who are focused on the North American infrastructure market. And one of the things that I would say is a key lesson, and certainly I think one of the drivers of our success, is that we combine together investment professionals, so finance professionals, with operational professionals. So the combination of those finance skills plus the ability to drive operational performance has been one of the keys of Stonepeak's success. So we manage 15 billion of capital, and we have 120 investors from around the world, and we are pleased and very thankful to have NPS as one of our supporters and partners. And so we've been working very hard with them, and we can see that NPS is one of the leading institutions in the world in investing in infrastructure. A lot of what we do and a lot of what we try and do in delivering value is trying to find transactions and investment opportunities that we call off the run. And really what I mean by that is you can generate huge benefits for your investors if you are willing to roll up your sleeves, find infrastructure problems, and deliver solutions. Again, it's all part of the creation of value process that we pursue as a manager. In terms of the team that we have that executes on this, it's really a diversity of skills. And one of the lessons that I'd say we've learned as a manager, and certainly one of the lessons I would encourage Jeonju to pursue, is you really want to have a diversity of talents. You want to have people from different backgrounds, from different cultures, people who have different skills, both on the financing side and the operational side, risk. The combination of all of those professionals and those different skills will deliver you the best results. So diversity and a focus on that, working together as a team, is really critical to deliver value, we believe. And when the way in which we work with some experienced operators, we've partnered with ex-CEOs from infrastructure businesses all throughout the United States, both in transport, communications, energy, renewables. So we work with those executives to help us deliver value. And one of the things I'd say that we've learned is that there is no substitute for having extremely experienced people working with sort of a young, energetic team. The combination of that experience and youth and energy has been a big driver for our success, just being relentless in terms of how we pursue investment opportunities. In terms of what we've learned as an investor, in terms of how to generate value, I think the things that I would say is that having the experience of the team, having a focus on your strategy is very important. Trying to compete away from broader auctions and what other people are doing, so having sort of originality of thought in terms of pursuing the investments. But more, like probably the driver to our investment philosophy is downside protection. In the investment world, it's the greatest sin out there is to lose money. And so we focus incredibly diligently on the downside. We want to make sure that our investments are well protected. We invest money for pension funds, insurance companies, and this goes to support teachers, firemen, public servants. And so our mission critical is to make sure that we protect their capital. One of the ways in which we protect capital is by delivering operational value. It's one of the ways in which you can increase the returns and minimize the risk in what you're doing. Look, the other thing I would say as well is that globally we live in a cyclical environment. The markets have highs, the markets have lows, and we are very focused on making sure that we understand those and that we don't get carried away. When the world is very frothy and everybody is happy, honestly, that's when we worry the most. And so that's one of the keys to our investment philosophy, is being aware of the price of assets. What I'll do is give you a little bit of an example of some of the deals that we've done in the North American market to give you a sense of how we think about infrastructure investing and what the landscape looks like. One of the first investments we made as a manager was in a transport logistics business. It does some very simple things. It takes grain from the farms in the Pacific Northwest of the US, transports them down to the port, and it then exports the grains to Asia. And so, as part of this investment, we own the terminals up and down the river system. Our customers are the farmers who are producing the wheat for export, and we do this under long-term contracts. So we have a very stable, steady business. There is some fluctuation in the business, but it is primarily driven by some harvests are better than others. One of the lessons that we did learn as part of this investment was it was being run, I'd say, by a semi-professional management group when we first bought the asset. And so what we did as a manager is we went in and applied sort of best techniques on operations. So we measured everything that the business did. And some of the lessons we learned was that the boats actually that are used to transport the wheat, there was no real system or organization in how they would choose the boat for a particular mission. And so we did a study, and we found out that by prioritizing which boats went out first, we could save 20% of the fuel as part of the operations. And so that does two things. It makes our investors money, and it uses less resource. And we applied that across the overall business. We recently sold this investment. We managed to increase the operational cash flow of the business by 75% during our ownership. And we managed to candidly grow the business footprint of the business. So we invested in the business. We invested in new equipment. We invested in the people. And so it's been a very successful case study. One of the comments that was made earlier is about the digitization of the economy today. So Stonepeak owns the second largest provider of small cell systems in the US. And so what small cells are is they are the units that are put in large cities to deal with the transmission of data where you've got potentially hundreds of thousands of people in very close environments. So when cell phones were first invented and came to the market, most of the transmission of cellular data was coming off cell phone towers. Now, if you fast forward to today, the amount of data transmission that is happening is growing at about 50% per annum, which is frankly stunning. And so you need small cells to actually densify the networks and create more antennas in those dense urban environments to deal with the data transmission. It's been a very educational experience for us. This business at the moment is growing at about 40% per annum. We provide services to the big telecommunication customers in the US, people like Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, and we leverage our system. So once we build a system for one of our customers, we can leverage that same infrastructure multiple times. So if we provide a system for Verizon, we can put T-Mobile on it, we can put AT&T on it, and for us, it's efficient, but it also drives investment returns. And so it's been a very good experience from that standpoint. The business itself has been growing at about 40%, and this is all before the rollout of 5G. What's going to happen with 5G is probably 5 times the number of antennas that we've had for 4G, and the data transmission speed, depending on who you believe, could be as much as 100 times faster. The other thing that we're learning through this experience is that these systems are going to deliver the economy to the next level. They're going to allow for things like driverless cars, machine-to-machine communications. It's going to be a huge driver of the economic efficiency in the US. And this technology will be coming to Asia and Korea. So it's really what we see as a way of investing in the future digitization of the economy. This is a story. This is Golar Power. It's a story from the energy universe. So what Golar Power does is it provides LNG FSRUs. So essentially, you have LNG carriers that have a regas unit on those boats, and they can transmit that gas to the shore. Where this has been particularly useful is where gas is required for power generation in areas that are remote and far away from any other gas pipeline networks. And FSRUs, these vessels, allow for the they speed up the access to market of providing gas, and they're relatively cheaper than building large-scale LNG import facilities. So we've actually been, the first one of our LNG FSRUs that was deployed was actually built here in Korea. It was a vessel called the Nanook. And so there was about $300 million of capital costs that was developed here in the Korean economy. So one area where we do see good future for the Korean economy is actually in building these vessels. And what they're typically doing is supplying power plants that are replacing older and dirtier fuel transmission sources like fuel oil or coal. So improving the overall environmental footprint. To further go on and talk about the digitization of the economy, Stonepeak invests in data centers. So we have a company called Cologix, which has data centers in both North America and Canada. And we are seeing massive growth in investment and demand for data storage in these data centers. The use of data centers has just become so much more critical for the operation of the economy, and we continue to see that going forward. And again, in Korea, we expect that you would see exactly the same sort of trends playing out. What we're seeing is really a lot of the demand is being coalesced around some of the larger players in the market, people like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and a lot of the businesses are outsourcing their data to the cloud, and that is requiring large investment in data usage. In fact, if you actually look at the amount of power that's being consumed by data centers, it's I believe it's roughly around it's the 10th largest of consumer of power in the world. So again, this is an area that is growing in global importance and is a key infrastructure target for Stonepeak and candidly a lot of other infrastructure managers. Lastly, I'll just finish up with one other example in the logistics sector. Moving on from the digitization of the economy, we as investors invest in physical infrastructure that supports the transportation and storage of food and agricultural products. it sort of links in with some of the themes that we were talked about earlier in this conference. So we own a large position in Lineage Logistics, which is the largest provider of cold storage in the United States. And so what it does, it's very large-scale cold storage facilities that are located close to the agricultural hubs that produce key proteins like chicken and beef and similar food items that need to be frozen. And so it's a very sticky model in terms of we have very reliable, steady customers. Food security is incredibly important in this sector because people, once you actually produce the beef or the chicken, you need to very quickly get it into a cold storage facility for food safety and security reasons. And from an investment standpoint, it's a very steady business. Even when you have large recessions, the consumption of food is really a non-discretionary item. So you see very small changes in that business. It's a very sticky customer base. It's very difficult to move your operations from our cold storage facilities. And our cold storage facilities are a very small part of the overall food supply. So it's been a wonderful business for us. We own these facilities. There's more than 50 of them around the US. And with that, I'll conclude that we are very thankful to be here, and we wish the best for the region and their mission to become a financial hub.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Trent Vici. That was an excellent presentation. 네, 세 번째 강연은 BC 파트너스 공동 책임자이신 리차드 군제르 파트너님께서 유럽 및 북미 바이아웃 투자 기회에 대해서 강연해 주시겠습니다. 리차드 군제르 파트너님은 BC 파트너스 IR 부서 공동 책임자이자 파트너로 재직 중이시고요. 또 모든 BC 파트너스 아시아 투자자들에 대해서 이 책임을 맡고 계시다고 합니다. 그럼 이제 앞으로 모시겠습니다. 여러분 큰 박수 부탁드립니다. So next, Mr. Richard Kunzer, the partner of BC Partners, will give us a great presentation. 저희 박수가 좀 늦었는데요. 다시 한번 박수로 환영해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
Thank you very much indeed. As noted, I'm Rich Kunzer. I'm the co-head of investor relations at BC Partners. And I'd like to thank you all for inviting me here and my colleagues here today. Especially thank the governor of the region and the chairman and CEO of MPS, who are a strong partner of ours. I'm just going to provide a brief overview now of BC Partners. There's a number of slides in your book. I won't go through all of them, but I thought it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about how we look at things and a little bit about the markets across the buyout side, but also very briefly on credit and real estate. And hopefully, with technology, there'll be a little film to start. So who are we? We look at being powered by localized networks and a very international perspective. BC Partners looks to connect leading companies with the access and expertise to extend and scale their businesses for lasting growth. That's our mantra. So who are we? We're a global boutique alternative investment manager. We are still a very much partnership-driven firm. We were actually founded 32 years ago as a firm called Bearings Capital. Some of you might remember Barings and a certain Mr. Leeson. And so in 1995, we changed our name to BC Partners and have carried on since. We've invested over 20 billion euros in 106 investments across 17 countries and 7 sectors in our history. And our performance is shown here, which is very strong. We've got almost 80 investment professionals across 3 strategies of private equity, credit, and real estate. And interestingly, we're located in London, New York, Paris, and Hamburg. And I mentioned the last one because I think that's an interesting area for a private equity headquarters, in that it's not the main city in a country. And so I think that's something to think about as we sit here today here in Jeonju. We've got an investor base that is truly global. Almost 40% of our investor capital comes from North America. Interestingly, 26% comes from Asia. And we have public pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, fund of funds, and so forth as our investors. But how do we partner with our investors? It's all about partnership. Well, we do a lot of co-investments. It's something that you hear about in the financial world more and more, and I'm sure my colleagues from Stonepeak and other firms do a lot of co-investment with their partners. But we have done this for almost 30 years, and for every euro of equity that we've invested over the past 10 years, we've additionally given our partners 50 cents plus of co-investment alongside us. This ranges in size from a co-investment of $400,000 by one investor through to $1 billion from another investor. And we do it not just across across private equity, but also credit, and now on the real estate side as well. More importantly, how do we partner with you, our Korean investors? Korea is actually BC Partners' largest capital base outside of North America. We have frequent visits here by senior investment team members. We organize seminars and teach-ins in New York, London, and also Seoul. I was here last week, and we were doing that in Seoul. And we also have done a number of co-investments alongside our Korean partners in both European and North American companies. So what do? We invest in mid to large size market-leading businesses in Europe and North America. We focus, and this is, I think, a mantra you'll hear across a number of people today, in what we call defensive growth companies, i.e. businesses that are market leaders, they're downside protected, but where you can create value, you can grow them. We like businesses that have lots of levers to pull, lots of different ways that you can create value, whether that's M&A, whether that is expanding into new markets, operational improvements, synergies from bringing companies together. I'd say one thing that we've done a lot of over the years is actually looking to this region to grow European companies. We recently bought the leading orchid floricultural genetics company. It's a bit of a mouthful, but they are the leading orchid providers globally, and they're based here in Asia. We, a number of years ago, created the world's largest chemical logistics company by growing our businesses here in Asia. So we are very focused on the region to grow our businesses and to integrate and work together. We look at businesses that have got a good cash flow, and we look at businesses where there's lots of different angles that we can look at, whether that is we know the business well, et cetera, et cetera. I'll give one example in a business which I think here in the region actually has a number of clients. It's the world's leading animal tagging and farm management business. This was a business we looked at and followed for 12 years before we actually pulled the trigger and made an investment. So these are the types of things that we do. And as I said, we like defensive markets, we like market-leading businesses, and we like growth. And I think that's something that we all like to look at when we're making investments. We have 7 sectors we focus on: business services, consumer, financial services, healthcare, industrials, retail, and TMT. We don't do things in the energy space. We don't like cyclical businesses. But we've been very diversified, and diversification is a key tenet of everything that we do. So moving on just briefly to credit and real estate. So credit, This is a business we started a couple of years ago. A number of you will know that Goldman Sachs has got a very strong special situations group in alternative investments. Some of the key players of that business joined us after many years working together. And we do two elements in credit. We look at the yield side, which is very high up in the capital structure, generating strong returns in the sort of 10 to 12% area. And then we look at opportunistic, which includes everything from distressed debt, structured equity, aircraft leasing. And what we like to be is flexible as we approach deploying capital. We focus again on downside protection, capital preservation, but look at it from a very unique private equity approach. And because credit is part of our business and integrated with private equity, there's a huge amount of domain knowledge and expertise that we have. We source across lots of different areas through our credit team relationships, through our private equity platform, and through strategic partnerships. For example, we're a partner of the second largest middle market lender in all of North America, and they provide us with a look at all of their deal flow. They do billions and billions of dollars of loans a year, and so we get to look at the first and second lien and the unitranche. That's a very strong partnership that we have there. And what are the themes as you look at credit? What's the market environment? Well, there's been a real retrenching of traditional lenders in North America. The banks, only 10, 15 years ago used to do 70, 80% of all the middle market lending in the US. That's now down at 4%. There's been a huge growth of leveraged credit markets in the US, so it's a very wide, it's a very deep market, and there's still the opportunity to generate significant returns well above the syndicated markets. And there's an ever-changing liquidity landscape. If you look at the markets, certain areas come in and out of fashion, and so you aim to be very nimble and be in and out of the private credit markets. And there's various conditions that are ongoing that provide a lot of opportunity. Public markets are very priced to perfection. You're seeing returns in the liquid fixed income markets. For example, high yield is in negative territory this year, whilst private credit is still generating significant positive returns. Everyone talks about distress. When is distress going to hit the market? Well, overall, the default rates are actually quite low, but they differ from sector to sector. Retail, transport, telecommunications, there's a large amount of distress. Financials and real estate, there isn't, but that could change very quickly. And that's a good segue onto my final comments just on real estate. We look at real estate from a European perspective. We have a team that has been investing across Europe for many, many years. Their focus is on office, residential, retail, multi-use, and also platform investing. And we think there's a very large opportunity. Our strategy is really not assuming that the cap rate compression is going to generate returns, but more focus on long-term fundamental trends. There's a lot of disruption in the market. There are imbalances in the European real estate market, and there's huge changes in society. And this goes to, I think, some of the things we'll talk about on the panel, about how do you encourage people to move into cities. They've moved out into areas around. Well, we're seeing it in Europe. We're seeing there is a shift from the generations and demographics. People are moving back into cities, not just into the major cities, but into smaller cities across Europe. They're doing so because there's a change in the way people work with technology. The fact that people in Europe don't own as many cars as they used to. They use Uber, they use public transport, etc. So there's a real change in the market, and we see that as a real opportunity. And there's an opportunity to regenerate the urban environment. And how do we look at that? We think that it's a very interesting value-added proposition. It's not just about core real estate anymore. It's about redeveloping, regenerating assets, and focusing on environmental and social change, ESG, making assets, real estate assets, have much more of a carbon-free footprint, using wood, using natural sources that are renewable when you're rebuilding offices or residential areas. And so with that, I will hand over to the next speaker.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Richard Kunzer. That was a thorough presentation. 네, 세션 1의 마지막 강연은요. 골드만삭스 자산운용 한국 대표이신 유진 김 대표님께서 세컨더리 투자, 꾸준하고 견고한 수익에 대해서 발표해 주시겠습니다. 골드만삭스 자산운용 한국 대표이신 유진 김 대표님은 사업 개발 및 법인 관계 관리에 주력하고 계십니다. 여러분 큰 박수로 환영해 주십시오.
네, 안녕하십니까. 방금 소개받은 골드만삭스 자산운용에서 근무하고 있는 김의진이라고 합니다. 유진 킴이라고 되어 있는데요. 그러니까 제 영어 이름이고 한국 이름은 김의진입니다. 오늘 귀한 자리에 불러주셔서 감사드리고요. 특히나 김성주 이사장님하고 안효진 본부장님 앞에서 발표할 수 있는 기회를 주셔서 감사합니다. 오늘 제가 말씀드릴 내용은 세컨더리에 대한 부분입니다. 세컨더리에서 주로 이제 첫 번째는 세컨더리 시장의 전반적인 개념하고 어떤 거래가 있는지에 대해 설명을 드리고요. 두 번째는 그런 이런 세컨더리 거래가 이 투자가한테 어떤 매력이 있느냐에 대한 부분. 그다음에 세 번째는 이런 향후의 세컨더리에는 어떤 부분에서 저희가 관심을 가져야 되느냐 이렇게 나눠서 설명드리도록 하겠습니다. 세컨더리 투자라는 거는 지금 앞에서도 많은 이제 대체 관련된 말씀하셨는데. 프라이빗 에쿼티가 되든 프라이빗 크레딧 됐든 부동산이 됐든 대부분의 어떤 대체 투자를 하게 될 경우에는 투자자들은 그 방법은 주로 리미티드 파트너십의 LP 지분을 사는 형태로다가 되게 됩니다. 그렇게 돼서 투자가 되게 되는데 이 세컨더리 투자는 그렇게 소유하게 된 LP 지분을 원래는 한 10년 정도 이제 보유할 목적으로 했지만 그걸 중간에 다른 목적에 의해서 중간에 파는 시장 그걸 갖다가 이제 세컨더리 시장이라고 얘기를 하고 있고요. 통상적으로 우리가 생각하고 있는 주식의 발행 시장과 유통 시장 그거와 관련돼 보시면 될 것 같습니다. 근데 이렇게 보면 요거는 전반적으로 말씀드린 것처럼 세컨더리 시장을 말씀드렸는데 그 이전에 프라이머리 시장 그러니까 이제 발행 시장에 대한 부분에 대해서도 보면은 최근에 이제 펀드레이징 된 부분들 최근 나와 있는데 최근 그 규모를 보면은 지금 이제 금융위기 이전에 비슷한 수준으로까지 많이 되고 있고요. 이렇게 활발하게 펀드레이징이 되고 있다는 얘기는 결국은 이렇게 투자한 사람들이 새롭게 시장에다가 이 투자 지분을 파는 그런 세컨더리 시장도 훨씬 더 상당히 커지고 있다. 이런 부분을 갖다 간접적으로 말씀드린다고 할 수 있을 겁니다. 그럼 이제 궁금증이 생기는 것들은 그렇게 원래 대체 투자를 할 경우에 한 10년 정도 투자한다고 지분을 샀는데 이걸 왜 중간에 이 사람들이 팔 것인가, 왜 팔 것인가에 대한 어떤 궁금증이 생기게 됩니다. 그 이유는 여러 가지가 있을 수가 있는데 맨 왼쪽에 나와 있는 것처럼 가장 대표적인 게 이제 액티브 매니지먼트에 대한 부분입니다. 저희가 일반적으로 대체가 아니라 전통 자산에 투자를 하게 되면 펀드 투자하게 되면 중간에 성과에 따라서 또는 매니저가 제대로 하고 있는지 안 하는지를 중간에 평가하면서 중간에 변경을 시킨다 여러 가지 액티브한 활동을 하게 되는데 대체 투자 같은 경우에는 그런 수단들이 별로 없었습니다. 하지만 거기에 대한 수요는 상당히 많았었고요. 그러나 액티브 매니지먼트의 필요에 의한 부분이 하나가 있고요. 그다음에 두 번째 부분들은 투자자들도 10년 동안 자금이 묶이는 부분에 대해서 원치 않고 중간에 이거를 유동화하고 싶은 그런 이제 강한 욕구가 생긴다는 부분이고요. 그다음 밑에 있는 합병 관련된 부분은 최근에 들어서도 이제 금융위기 이후에 금융기관들의 자발적이든 비자발적인 합병들이 많이 일어나게 되는데 하다 보면은 예를 들어서 A하고 B 금융기관 합치는데 갖고 있는 투자의 익스포저들이 서로 겹치는 부분이 많이 생길 수가 있습니다. 어떤 지역적으로도 겹칠 수가 있고 전략별로 겹칠 수가 있는데 그런 부분들을 일부 조정하고 싶은 그런 욕구가 생겨날 수밖에 없는 부분이 생기고요. 그다음에 가운데 나와 있는 이제 규제 부분에 대해서는 글로벌 금융위기 이후에 금융기관 관련된 많은 규제들이 있고 있는데요. 대부분의 규제들이 금융기관들이 자기 자본으로다가 이런 에쿼티성 투자를 어렵게 하는 그런 이제 규제들이 많아지고 있습니다. 그래서 그런 규제에 대응하기 위해서 이 지분을 팔게 되는 경우도 발생되고요. 특히나 최근에 이제 우리나라에서도 보험회사들의 무슨 RBC라든가 여러 가지 건전성 규제들이 나오고 있는데 그런 이유들 중도 기존에 대체 투자한 지분들을 조정하고 싶은 그런 이제 욕심들이 나게 됩니다. 그다음에 또 한 가지 말씀드릴 수 있는 부분은 이제 CIO 체인지 부분인데요. 우리나라에서도 이제 CIO들이 이제 몇 년마다 바뀌게 되는데 해외 모든 기관에서도 뭐 CIO가 우리보다는 자주는 아니지만 뭐 10년, 15년마다 또 이렇게 바뀌게 되는 경우가 발생이 되게 되면 그 CIO가 오게 되면 그 동안에 있었던 익스포저들을 다시 한번 쭉 보고서는 한번 거기서 변화를 주고 싶은 욕구가 생길 수밖에 없습니다. 이제 그런 와중에서 기존에 갖고 있는 대체 투자 LPG 분들을 조정하고 있는 그런 목적에서 이제 되는 부분이 있고요. 그리고 이제 위에 나와 있는 인센티브 부분도 이 펀드가 한 맨 처음에는 그 LP와 그다음에 GP 운영 매니저와의 그 이해가 서로 간에 일치를 하겠지만 시간이 지나면서 때로는 그 서로 간에 그 이해가 서로 달라지는 부분이 많이 생길 수가 있습니다. 그런 부분들을 이해를 다시 한번 일치시키기 위한 그런 목적으로도 이런 거래가 이루어지게 됩니다. 그래서 지금 말씀드린 것처럼 이런 세컨더리 거래들이 있게 되고 이거는 뭐 그러니까 아주 뭐 특수한 상황이 아니라 아주 빈번하게 발생되고 있다는 것을 말씀드리기 위해서 최근에 나와 있던 신문 기사에 나와 있던 세컨더리 거래에 대한 것들을 몇 가지 소개를 해봤습니다. 그러면 이제 이런 그 LP 지분을 파는 셀러들은 주로 이제 어떤 사람들인가에 대한 부분인데요. 과거에는 여기 나와 있는 것처럼 퍼블릭 펜션 펀드라든가 금융기관들이었습니다. 퍼블릭 펜션 펀드들은 가장 오랫동안 대체 투자를 해왔던 기관들이기 때문에 하다 보면은 여러 가지 이제 월로케이션이 좀 많아진다든가 많이 투자했으니까 그만큼 많이 팔고 싶은 욕구도 생겼었고요. 그다음에 금융기관들은 아까 설명드렸던 것처럼 글로벌 금융위기 이후에 대체자표를 갖다가 약간의 좀 조정하고 싶고 어떤 클린업하고 싶은 욕구에 의해서 많이 셀러를 하게 됐었습니다. 근데 이제 최근에 그 흐름은 뭐 이런 기관들 외에 주로 이제 펀드라든가 어셋 매니저들한테도 많이 파는 경우가 많이 발생을 하고 있습니다. 요 얘기는 아까 말씀드렸던 것처럼 이 펀드를 좀 액티브하게 매니고 하고 싶은 그런 욕구가 많아지고 있다는 걸 나타낸다고 할 수 있을 것 같습니다. 그다음에 지역적으로 봐서는 뭐 당연히 북미라든가 유럽 쪽이 많습니다만 최근 들어서 어떤 이머징 마켓 쪽에서도 많이 나타나고 있고요. 그다음에 이제 거래 형태들도 여기서 이제 오른쪽에 있는 부분들 가장 전통적인 부분 이 거래 형태뿐만 아니라 최근 들어서는 왼쪽에 남아 있는 부분들에 대한 거래 형태도 나타나고 있습니다. 이걸 간단히 설명드리면 이게 이제 가장 전형적인 거래 형태라고 할 수 있을 겁니다. 그러니까 첫 번째 투자자가 있어서 뭐 A라는 그 GP를 통해서 펀드 A, B, C를 투자를 했고요. 이 지분들을 한꺼번에 다시 파는 가장 일반적인 형태가 될 수 있습니다. 그다음에 이건 약간 좀 복잡해져서 그 멀티 매니저, 그러니까 매니저의 하나가 아니라 A, B, C 네 개 매니저에 갖고 있는 그 투자 지분을 한꺼번에 묶어서 파는 형태인데요. 이런 것들은 실제로 일어났던 해인데요. 금년 6월에 아시아 소재하고 있는 뭐 대형 소버린 웰스 펀드에서 어떤 이유에 의해서 기존에 갖고 있는 대체 투자 그 지분들을 한번 정리하고 싶은 목적에 의해서 실제로 이런 큰 거래가 한번 일어났었습니다. 그다음에 최근에 나와 있는 건 여기에 나와 있는 리퀴드 솔루션이라 할 수 있는 부분들은 여태까지 말씀드렸던 건 주로 이제 LP들이 자기 지분을 파는 거였다면 지금에서 이제 GP들이 투자하고 있는 LP들한테 유동성을 제공해 주는 목적으로의 어떤 LP가 주도적으로 하는 그런 이제 거래 형태들이 나타나고 있고요. 요건 뭐 대표적인 뭐 GP들의 이름들이고 뭐 요게 아마 가장 이해가 될 수 있을 것 같습니다. 왼쪽에 나와 있는 것처럼 기존에 오래된 펀드가 하나 있었고요. 그게 이제 꽤 오래됐었는데 기존에 있는 LP 중에서는 일부 자기 지분을 팔고 싶은 LP들이 나타났었습니다. 그래서 이 욕구를 해소하기 위해서 새로운 펀드를 오른쪽에 만들고 그래서 일부 GP는 이제 지분을 팔고 나가고 그다음에 기존 뭐 일부는 다시 그대로 있고요. 그다음에 또 새로운 또 투자자를 또 모집을 해서 또 새로운 펀드를 만드는 뭐 이런 식의 거래들이 나타나고 있습니다. 결국은 기존에 투자하고 있었던 LP 지분에 대해서 새로운 유동성이 생기는 그런 형태라고 할 수 있습니다. 그래서 이 세컨더리 거래 규모들이 상당히 늘어나고 있는데 요거는 저희 회사에서 세컨더리를 투자를 하기 위해서 그 이밸류에이션 한 건수만을 얘기한 건데 금융위기 이후에 거의 한 3배 정도 늘어났다고 볼 수 있고요. 그리고 요건 실제로 거래된 건데 이 역시 한 3배 정도가 늘어났다고 할 수 있습니다. 그리고 실제로 이런 세컨더리에만 집중하고 있는 펀드 숫자들도 뭐 40개 펀드 그다음에 금액 자체도 상당히 늘어나고 있고요. 여태까지는 이제 세컨더리 투자가 이제 어떤 거라는 거에 대한 말씀을 드렸고요. 그럼 과연 이런 세컨더리에 투자를 하는 게 투자가 입장에서 어떤 매력이 있을 것이냐에 대한 얘기를 말씀드리겠습니다. 5가지인데요. 첫 번째가 이제 일반적으로 말하고 있는 이제 J커브, 그 다음에 이제 다각화, 그 다음에 이제 펀드에 대한 재평가, 그 다음에 뭐 수익률, 뭐 이런 부분이 될 수 있을 것 같습니다. 첫 번째가 이제 J커브 효과인데 가장 많이들 얘기하고 있는 세컨더리 투자의 이유라 할 수 있습니다. 실제로 이제 그 펀드 투자를 프라이머리 펀드를 투자하게 되게 되면은 펀드 초기에는 수익률이 마이너스가 됩니다. 왜 그러냐면 처음에 이제 어떤 투자 대상이 투자를 하고 그러니까 캐시플로우 아웃플로우가 발생을 하게 되고요. 그리고 이제 여러 가지 이제 비용이 발생되고 그다음에 몇 년이 지나서부터 점점 이제 수익이 발생되게 되는데 이제 그런 부분들이 이제 투자자 입장에서 불편할 수밖에 없고요. 근데 세컨더리 같은 경우에는 이미 투자가 어느 정도 진행된 지분을 사는 거기 때문에 이런 제이커브 효과가 이미 끝난 그런 펀드들을 사는 거기 때문에 초기부터 이 플러스 IRR을 기대할 수 있다는 그런 장점이 있을 수 있습니다. 두 번째는 뭐 가장 일반적으로 얘기하기는 이제 분산성에 대한 부분인데요. 어떤 한 가지 펀드에만 투자를 하게 되는 게 아니라 여러 가지 펀드를 한꺼번에 투자하는 게이기 때문에 거래 규모도 많고 그 다음에 상대하고 있는 매니저도 많고 그 다음에 펀드 익스포저라든가 그 다음에 전체 밑에 들어가 있는 서브 기업에 대한 숫자들도 많다는 다각성의 부분들. 그 다음에 거래 형태도 다양한 거래 형태를 취할 수 있다는 방법. 그 다음에 주로 이제 프라이머리 펀드들은 아무리 본인들이 글로벌리 운용한다고 하더라도 아무래도 몇 개 지역에 특화될 수밖에 없는 한계가 있습니다. 하지만 세컨더리 같은 경우에는 그런 그 지역적인 것도 분산을 취할 수 있다는 부분. 그다음에 이제 아까 말씀드렸던 것처럼 프라이머리들은 주로 이제 특정 산업에 집중될 수밖에 없다는 한계가 있는데 전반적으로 할 수 있다는 부분들. 그다음에 빈티지를 분산시킬 수 있다는 부분들이고요. 그다음에 또 세 번째로 말씀드릴 수 있는 부분들이 제가 보기엔 또 상당히 중요한 부분이라고 생각할 수 있는 건데 기존 투자에 대해서 다시 한번 평가할 수 있는 기회가 된다는 부분입니다. 대체 투자라는 것은 말 그대로 이 퍼블릭 마켓에서 이루어지는 게 아니기 때문에 여러 가지 정보가 상당히 없습니다. 그래서 투자 초기에는 물론 본인들이 잘한다고 투자를 했지만 거기에 대한 정보가 없기 때문에 잘한 건지 아닌 건지는 알 수가 없고요. 결국은 잘한 건지는 결국은 앞으로 10년, 20년이 지나서 펀드가 엑시트할 때만이 알 수가 있는데 이 그림이 나와 있는 것처럼 펀드 A, B의 차이는 초반기에는 전혀 알 수가 없습니다. 그리고 일단 투자를 하게 되는 거고요. 그러다가 하지만 세컨더리가 시장이 활성화됨으로 인해서 한 4년, 5년쯤 지난 다음에쯤 되면은 그 투자에 대해서 훨씬 더 많은 시장 정보가 나오기 때문에 그 펀드가 제대로 투자됐는가에 대해서 평가할 수 있는 기회가 제공되게 됩니다. 이런 세컨더리를 투자를 하게 되면은 이런 정보의 비효율성에 따라서 펀드를 선택하실 때 훨씬 편해진다는 그런 또 장점이 있을 수가 있습니다. 그다음에 수익성 측면에 봐서도 여기 뭐 세컨더리 바이아웃 또는 펀드 오브 펀드 나와 있는데 뭐 수익률이 상당히 좋은 거로 나타나고 있고요. 그다음에 그 가장 또 투자할 때 펀드 NAV 대비하는 그 디스카운트도 꾸준하게 한 90% 80% 후반 90%를 유지하고 있습니다. 그다음에 이제 마지막으로 말씀드릴 수 있는 부분들은 향후의 세컨더리 시장에 대해서 저희가 이제 유의해야 될 관심 있게 봐야 될 부분이 어딘가에 대해서만 간략히 말씀드리겠습니다. 첫 번째 말씀드릴 수 있는 부분들은 테일엔드 포트폴리오인데요. 그러니까 펀드들이 보통은 이제 그 대체 펀드들이 한 10년 정도라고 만기를 하는데 실제적으로는 10년이 아니라 한 15년, 16년까지 길어지게 됩니다. 그렇기 때문에 또 빨리 또 하고 싶은 길어지는 게 되는데 만약 그 길어진 해서 그런 그 펀드를 사게 된다면 새로운 투자자 입장에 봐서는 투자 기간이 되게 짧아질 거고요. 그다음에 상당히 다각화된 그런 펀드 포트폴리오를 얻을 수가 있습니다. 그다음에 펀드 리스트럭처링 관련된 부분에서 아까 말씀드린 GP하고 LP의 이해가 불일치돼서 새롭게 어떤 재구축되는 부분에서 어떤 나타날 수가 있고요. 그다음에 세 번째 부분을 알 수 있는 벤처 같은 부분에 있어서 최근 추세가 과거에는 그 소프트웨어 기업들이 보통 이제 설립돼서 한 4년 정도 지나면 이제 IPO를 한다 그랬었는데 최근 들어서는 그 IPO하는 기간들이 한 10년, 11년 정도 상당히 늘어지고 있는 그런 경험이 있습니다. 하기 때문에 벤처 투자가들은 또 훨씬 빨리 또 현금화시키고 싶은 그런 니드들이 또 발생하고 있고요. 그래서 그런 경우에서 또 투자 기회를 찾을 수가 있을 수 있고요. 그다음에 부동산 부분입니다. 부동산은 사실은 어떤 로케이션에 있느냐에 따라서 그 부동산 평가가 상당히 어려워지고 있기 때문에 그 얘기는 거꾸로 말해서 부동산 평가를 제대로 잘 할 수만 있다면 거기서 큰 수익을 얻을 수 있다는 뭐 그런 장점이 있을 수 있을 것 같습니다. 이상으로 해서 약간 쫓기듯이 다 설명을 드렸는데 간단히 요약을 해서 말씀드리면은 세컨더리 시장이 상당히 커지고 있다. 그 다음에 그 셀러리라든가 거래 형태들도 상당히 다양화되고 있고 그렇게 되는 이유들은 기존에 그 대체 투자를 하게 된 프라이머리 펀드들이 원래 그 펀드 만기가 한 10년 정도로 생각했는데 그거 이상으로 상당히 길어지고 있기 때문에 발생하고 있다는 얘기를 말씀드렸고 그렇기 때문에 그런 펀드에 투자되고 있는 세컨더리 투자로서 여러 가지 베네핏, 그 다음에 수익성도 얻을 수 있다. 뭐 이런 식으로 말씀을 드렸습니다. 감사합니다.
모든 발표 이제 다 들었는데요. 그럼 지금부터 첫 번째 세션의 패널 토론을 진행하도록 하겠습니다. 이번 세션 패널 토론의 좌장님은 전북대학교 김민호 교수님께서 맡아주시도록 하겠습니다. 김민호 교수님은 일반적으로 투자 분야, 특히 금융자산거래 대상을 다루는 시장의 미시 구조 연구에 정통하십니다. 그럼 이제 저희 좌장님께 마이크를 넘기도록 하겠습니다.
예, 안녕하세요. 전북대학교 무역학과 김민우 교수입니다. It is my great honor to be here as a chairman. If it is an academic conference, we have discussion for each presenters, and the chairman is just a man who sits on the chair. But here we don't have discussions, so I prepared some questions. I think you already have questions, and I don't think we have much time left for lunch. So if I think I ask you to answer, you already have questions, right? So we have several questions. So if you can answer us the first questions only, because of time limits, and especially Mr. Liu Jinyang, if you can give us some policy implication to attract the alternative investment like infrastructure investment, it will be great help for our policymakers to make a decision. Okay.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the question. In terms of policy, I think the UK has been quite successful, generally speaking, in getting private investment into infrastructure. It's difficult to count how much private investment there has been, but on different measures, you get somewhere between 50 and 75% of UK infrastructure is privately owned, and that's a miles higher number than you'll get in most countries around the world. The core to most of this is to have a very, very transparent policy that is clearly run in an independent way from any government control. And if you look at the water and water waste sectors, the electricity generation sectors, the transportation sectors, in each of these examples, you've had an independent regulator set up. They come up with a transparent pricing policy. There's a public auction effect when licenses come for renewal. And so everybody in society can see what the rules, the regulations are. There's a chance when people underperform that they can be removed or have their licenses taken away. But it's that process. And I think if you can get that process absolutely right, it's surprising how much global investment money there is for it.
Okay, thank you. I believe that would be very helpful for our policymakers. Thank you for your answer. And for the second presenter, Mr. Beach, the first question asked about the factors that we should need to analyze when we entering the energy sector. If you are familiar with the energy sector, especially we are asking this because we are trying to set up some energy sectors like solar power in our region, and it will be very helpful, the Korean firms, if you give us your opinion about what factors should we need to analyze when we entering the energy sector like solar power.
Thank you so much for the question. Look, I think, and this echoes a little bit on earlier comments, the first thing that investors really want to see is certainty of what the business model is, whether it's a regulatory model or in the case of typically solar, it's typically handled through a feed-in tariff or a PPA, which is essentially, just in simple terms, a $1 per megawatt hour, like a fixed price for the sale of solar power. I'd add a couple of other comments that it's really important, particularly in distributed energy like solar, to have strong buy-in from the communities as well. Like the government can't just impose upon communities the requirements of these for solar power without actually involving the community. So I think it's really, really critical. Particularly with solar power distributed, the transmission grids that were built originally were basically built for the large-scale generation of power, then transported to the demand centers like the cities. The issue with solar power and wind power is that those facilities tend to be smaller and more distributed, such that you need to make sure that when you embark upon these programs, that you've undertaken and understood the electricity grid as it stands today to make sure that it can actually deal with the this new generation load that's been delivered. The other things that I would say is just regulatory certainty, rule of law, community support. I mean, these are all just very basic things, but if you have those right, I think that's a very good path forward. And look, there's been models used all around the world for this that can be copied.
Okay, thank you. We don't have much time, but I'm from the university, so I'm asking your second question, which is asking about the graduate school for specializing in pension fund. We have governor from the Korean pension fund, so we are trying to set up a graduate school specializing in pension fund. And you are the expert in alternative investors. So if you can suggest some kind of subject matters that we need to teach to educate the expert in alternative investment, what kind of curriculum could you suggest?
Yeah, I'd say that there's obviously the basic elements of finance that you want to be teaching as part of these courses. I'd actually say, particularly in alternative investments, a topic that I think is really important to communicate and educate the people on is alignment of incentives. Time and time again where I've seen things not work, it's because of poorly aligned incentives. And that's one of the things that when pension funds are looking at alternative managers is to actually focus on, well, look at the people, look at the strategy, and is it aligned with the objectives that we as pension funds have? I'd also say, candidly too, one of the most interesting things I learned in graduate school coming from Australia was an awareness of sort of cross-cultural issues as well. The course was primarily designed around explaining that just because something happens in a certain way in a certain market doesn't mean that when you lift it up due to cultural differences that it will work in another market. So I actually think educating students about those type of things is really important. The other thing which I would say too is if you want to learn about alternative investments, perhaps you should have a secondment program or a program where the students can maybe go and visit with or do short periods of time working with different institutions around the world. One as a way to learn, but also as a way for networks to be built up. Time and time again, we've come across pension funds who really desire, they want to talk to other pension funds about what they're doing and transfer knowledge. But
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your opinion. It will be very helpful. Okay, the third presenter, Mr. Kunjara, could you answer the question one that is asking what kind of strategies we need in order to attract financial companies, especially we are in the provincial city. what kind of strategies we need to attract financial companies is specialized in alternative investment?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question, and actually it's something that if you look around, and I'll use the UK. I'm British, although I live in the US. But if you look at the UK, you find alternatives managers in Edinburgh, Leeds. There's some in others in Birmingham. They're not just in London. Where we have our office in Germany is in Hamburg, in the north of Germany. Everyone knows, the capital is, and the financial capital especially, is Frankfurt. I actually can hardly think of a private equity firm in Germany that's based there. They're in Munich, they're in other locations. And you look at this as you look around the world, it's not just the capital city, and there's a couple of things that they all have in common is culture,
Okay.
good networks, both, I would say, from transport hubs, technology, universities, so there's a pool of talent, there's a pool of where they can network, and there's also businesses there, because at the end of the day, and I talk especially on private equity, business creates business. And the reason that you have firms in these locations is because you have the talent pool that can go out and spend time with other businesses and grow businesses. And so I think you've got a very interesting aspect, agriculture in this region. Now, we've done a huge amount of agricultural investment over the years on the private equity side. It's not just in farms, it's in technology, it's in other things. That will attract managers to the region.
Okay.
And the other thing that quite candidly attracts managers, alternatives managers to a region is where you have sources of capital. Use the example of Edinburgh. Huge location for insurance companies in the UK. And therefore, from that, you've grown an asset management industry around it. Now, here you have MPS, if you have insurance companies in the region.
Okay.
And as you attract other businesses, it attracts managers, and it's a self-fulfilling cycle.
Okay.
And I think that's, if you look globally, that's what you've seen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your insight that business really create business, right? Okay, thank you for your answer. 그리고 김 박사님께는 한국말로 질문 드릴게요. 우리 국내 펀드 사무 운영사들의 역량이 굉장히 아직은 좀 미흡할 거라고 생각을 하는데요. 국내 사모펀드 운영사들의 어떤 역량을 키우기 위해서 어떤 것들이 좀 필요한 것인지 좀 말씀해 주시면 고맙겠습니다.
네, 감사합니다. 상당히 어려운 질문인데요. 제가 그 부분에 대해서 이렇게 잘 알지 못하기 때문에 자세한 말씀을 못 드릴 것 같고요. 일단 제가 설명드렸던 부분이 지금 세컨더리에 대한 부분을 설명드렸는데, 세컨더리 투자 매니저와 프라이머리 매니저의 어떤 차이점이 있고, 그래서 세컨더리 매니저를 구할 때는 어떤 점이 더 유의를 해야 된다. 이 말씀만 간단히 드리도록 하겠습니다. 아시다시피 프라이머리 같은 경우에는 실제로 그 사람 매니저들이 하는 것들은 일단은 프라이빗 에쿼티 같은 경우에 기업을 일단은 실렉션하고요. 그다음에 그 기업들이 더 커나갈 수 있도록 사후에 도와주는 역할을 하는 게 이제 프라이머리 매니저들의 역할이라고 할 수 있고, 그다음에 세컨더리 매니저들의 역할은 이 기업을 하는 게 아니라 그러니까 매니저를 실렉션하고 펀드를 실렉션하고 하는, 그리고 나서 그 펀드들 간의 어떤 그러니까 리스크 매니지먼트를 한다든가 다각화한다든가 이런 식의 어떤 포트폴리오를 짜는 그런 역할일 거라고 생각됩니다. 그래서 이 세컨더리 투자 매니저 같은 경우에는 보다 어떤 그러니까 일반적인 금융기관에서 투자를 많이 하는 그런 부분에 관련된 부분들이 되게 많이 관련된 부분인 것 같고요. 반면에 프라이머리 매니저라고 한다면 실제로 기업을 실렉션하고 그걸 키우는 어떤 기업가적인 그런 역량이 더 필요한 그런 차이점이 있는 것 같고요. 그래서 세컨더리 투자 같은 경우에 훨씬 더라고는 좀 어폐가 있습니다만은 저희가 빨리 그 역량을 키울 수 있는 그 분야가 될 수 있지 않을까, 그런 생각을 잠깐 해봤습니다.
예. 시간이 없긴 하지만 두 번째 질문도 저희한테 중요할 것 같아서요. 어떤 이런 세컨더리 마켓을 활성화하기 위해서 어떤 국가 차원이나 도시 차원에서의 어떤 정책적인 지원 같은 것들이 어떤 정책적인 지원들이 필요한지 한번 좀 말씀해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
글쎄요. 또 역시 어려운 질문인데요. 어떤 정책적인 지원에 의해서 세컨더리 시장이 커진 경우가 있는지를 제가 뭐 과문한 탓인지를 알 수가 없어서요. 뭐 어떤 게 필요한지에 대한 말씀은 드릴 수는 없을 것 같은데 뭐 저런 생각은 듭니다. 그러니까 결국은 어떤 그 뭔가를 애를 갖다가 훌륭하게 잘하기 위해서는 그러니까 편하게 놀 수 있는 어떤 그 장을 만들어주면 될 것 같거든요. 근데 태어나기마저 뭐 어떤 유치원을 보내고 초등학교를 보내고 어떤 대학을 보내고 뭐 부모 입장에서 이제 그런 부분에 대해서 먼저 생각해야 되는데 그거보다도 편히 놀 수 있게 하는 일단은 그 큰 장을 만들어주는 여건을 만들어주는 인프라를 깔아주는 뭐 그런 역할이 필요하지 않을까라는 생각됩니다.
예, 감사합니다. Thank you for your wonderful presentation, and I truly believe your insight will create implication for our plan to help make a financial hub in Jeollabuk-do. Thank you for your presentation again. Thank you.